Hey guys, this is going to be episode 3 of the Strange Roads series. I did not get around to doing this for Sunday, so today's Monday. Last week I had like a burst of, inspiration, and I actually wound up finishing a book that I've been working on. I did like 18 hours straight of, I finished the writing and then I did all the editing and the formatting and all that stuff. So that's exciting because I didn't think I'd be done with it until like the first week of August, second week of August at the earliest. So I'm done with it now. I just have to have some people read it, go over it one more time, make sure it's not missing anything, it's ready to go. But I'm gonna make some more announcements about that in the future. But that kind of put me behind, and then we left for vacation, and I just stepped away from everything for like 4 days to hang out with the family and sit by the water and kind of decompress after the marathon sprint to finish that book. So when I left off, I was getting into Tibetan Buddhism. So I had kind of realized that I needed to find something that was like a system and something that was like bigger than myself, something that didn't rely on just me to like make a determination about like what was right and wrong. So like morality, moral issues, but also like so much of the New Age movement is just like, what do it kind of comes down to, do you like this or not, and does it feel good or not, and that's kind of how you determine what you're doing. So I realized that I'd been so against formal or like systematic religions for so long that I just couldn't do that anymore. And I needed to find something, right, that was like, that had some meat to it, that was like, that there was a path I could follow. And to like, Buddhism had always interested me a lot, just for, like, at least in my my understanding or the limited experience that I had with it. I read some of the Dalai Lama's books growing up, and you looked at the monks and the way that they lived and the dedication that they had to their practice and all that, and I looked at those guys and I was like, well, that's hardcore, like those guys are really doing it. And I didn't want to become a monk or anything necessarily, but that was really the next like logical step for me, because I definitely was not anywhere near monotheism, certainly not Christianity. So that my options were just really, dwindling at that point. Like I looked into Hinduism a little bit, but that just was not, like I've mentioned it before, it was really partly a cultural thing. Like I'm not, there's no one in my family, this may surprise you, who's Hindu, so it's not much of an option. Buddhism is the same way, but there are plenty of practicing Buddhists within Michigan and within the United States. I mean, it's not that uncommon to come across. So Buddhism was where I wound up leaning towards. And what really initially like hooked me on it was I had read the like basic texts for Buddhism, but the one that really hooked me was the Tibetan book of Living and Dying. And it's got a lot of really practical applications for things. It goes through different types of meditation, and that was the first time that I had, there's certain formulas definitely for like shamanic journeying and sort of like making your own ceremonies and stuff like that, but like a lot of that, I was just winging it, and like I said, I was borrowing things from traditions that I was studying. You take a little bit from like the Russian shamans and a little bit from the Central American shamans, and squish it all together, and there you go. But like that book really outlined a system that I could look at and be like, and say, this is step 1, this is step 2, these are the things that you can expect to experience while you're doing this. And that really appealed to me because I had felt like I'd been wandering for so long, without really any answers. And what really is underlying all of this, and I will get to it eventually, is authority. And that's a big reason why I went back to the church after I came into Christianity. But like, there's no authority in the New Age movement, other than the authority that you will give to people. Buddhism has authority, unto itself. There are masters of Tibetan Buddhism, and they have their own holy people that, live that practice exceptionally. So there are people that are still alive or were alive recently that wrote books about like how to be a Buddhist and how do you incorporate this into your life. So that it had authority, it had some teeth to it. The other thing I liked about Buddhism was that even though it was a system, it wasn't strict in the sense that you only had to be Buddhist, or that Buddhism was the only option. Like there were, I may not agree with it, but I ran into plenty of people that had picked up Tibetan Buddhist like meditation or other practices and kind of incorporated that into their own Christian walk. But having that be maybe less formal is the right way to put it. It wasn't as demanding on me, which at the time I was, that made me comfortable, because I could not imagine sort of I knew I needed authority and I knew I needed some structure, but I could not imagine subjecting my intellect and my will and my spirituality to something like Christianity, let alone the Catholic Church. So that was super appealing to me. That was a big part of it too. So I did Tibetan Buddhism for it was about 2.5, 3 years, and I practiced every day. I did all of the stuff that goes with it. I had a few different. They have prayer beads that are really similar to a rosary, and most cultures have some kind of a bead or a knotted rope or whatever. It's not uncommon. But I would do the mantras every day, hour of meditation, all of that stuff, and that was the first time that I really experienced like fruit from a practice, and it didn't take that long. Part of that certainly is just the act of meditating kind of clears your mind, it calms you down. It's beneficial in and of itself. It's beneficial in the same way that like if somebody tells you need to work out, it doesn't matter what you do, you just go work out. Like you're gonna benefit from that. And meditation broadly is like that. It's a lot like prayer, and it's the goal of Buddhist meditation is a lot different in many ways than prayer is. But for me, and it could be because of the ADHD that I have, but I definitely noticed and could tell that like I felt calmer and clearer, and so much of Buddhism is about like accepting that life is suffering, and how you treat other people, and not even just people, but like creation in general. So I was a lot more mindful of other people outside of my own head, and I really saw benefits from that over those years. I just felt a lot more peaceful in general. I think I had not that I had a bad attitude to begin with, but I definitely felt sort of that my intellect and my spirit was elevated from the place that I had come from, which in the shamanic realm that I was in, there's not a huge emphasis on personal spiritual development in as far as what you would maybe think of like with Buddhism, or definitely within Christianity for sure. You develop sort of authority and ability to work with different animal, like spirits and stuff like that. But there's the whole moral thing, and like there's no real concept of like dying to the self in the way that Christianity would explain it or think of it, or even Buddhism kind of gets into ego death, that sort of thing. So I did it for close to 3 years. I was pretty confident that that was what I was going to stay with for like a really long time. And I was confident enough in it that I also got Buddhist tattoos. There's like two main mantras within Tibetan Buddhism, and I have both of those on me. So I've got I've got the bear from like when I was doing the shamanic stuff, and then I also have like a prayer feather thing that I got a tattoo of while I was doing the shamanic stuff too. But the Buddhism, I really felt like this is what I'm going to stick with for a really long time. And then I had a few things happen to me in life that I had a hard time. I think just the age I was and going through something really difficult was really what was at the core of it. But I just didn't feel like my Buddhist practice was supporting me through that in a way that I wanted it to or needed it to, which is very likely my own fault or whatever. I mean, I never really reached out to anybody else that was practicing Buddhism. I never really got involved with any group of people that did it. You know, it was very much just me and books and stuff that I found on the internet and things like that. So it's possible that had I done it that way and maybe sought more of a community, people could have helped me through that, maybe. But I went through a couple of things like that where life just got really hard for a minute, and I had a really hard time kind of reconciling my Buddhist practice with some of those things. The other thing too is that I was sort of experiencing what I had experienced in the New Age movement, where I felt like I was starting to run out of runway. Like I had a good chunk of time where I was definitely progressing, like in meditation, and I was progressing in my own interior life, and you know, I could see the fruit of it, just like I said. But there's kind of a like Buddhism has its own, you know, it's got the Eightfold Path and stuff, like it tells you what it's all about and how it's going to go. But I started to not believe it as much as I did in the beginning. And I just sort of saw that the more I did it and kind of the deeper I got into it, that it became more and more nebulous. Because like within Catholicism, there's spiritual theology, and that outlines, you know, the journey of the soul from the beginning stages of the interior life all the way up to you know, the like divine union, which is exceptionally rare, but it does happen. But like it's a solid roadmap, and people have written about it, people have experienced Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, and I just felt like I was kind of in this, like, you know, like spiritual theology gives you 3 stages of the interior life, and I felt like I was kind of coming out of the first one and maybe into the second one as within the context of Buddhism. And then it was just like the road kind of started to disappear before me. Like I didn't have as clear of direction anymore for like what to do, what to keep doing. And it didn't make much sense to me that I would just keep doing the same stuff that I had been doing. Like there's got to be progress, or, you know, not progress for the sake of progress or change for the sake of change, but something had to start to look a little bit more different than it did like the 2 years before. So I was kind of growing disillusioned with it. I was kind of growing disillusioned with like life in general. I had, you know, like a bunch of my buddies moved away to college, and I was just kind of like left by myself. I had a really, really hard breakup that messed me up for a good long time. and just a few other things. But it was kind of this piling on of life circumstances and events that I was going through, and just sort of like, well, yeah, honestly, I was getting a little bit burned out. I remember, I'd been searching for so long and reading so many books over the years and trying so many different things, and like really, putting the time into it. And after, from 12 to like 2021, I pretty much was doing that consistently. And I kind of hit that crossroads again, sort of like I hit with the New Age movement, where it was like, this Buddhism is probably not it. And there's got to be something else, but like, I don't know where to go from here, because again, I'm not going to Christianity because that's ridiculous. There's not a lot of options left after that. Like, I looked into like the Sikh religion, because there's a lot of aspects of that I identified with and found appealing, but again, it's kind of a cultural thing, and it's a tough one to get into. There's not a lot of Sikhs around me, so how do I make that work, right? I felt like I was running out of road in Buddhism, and I was running out of options in general. So I kind of took a little bit of a break. I met my first wife right around that time, when I was kind of becoming disillusioned with my Buddhist practice, and I was kind of just like, what, I've built some kind of a moral and ethical code from all of these things. I have a rough idea of what I sort of broadly believe about, God, the universe, people, the meaning of life, stuff like that. Not that I had answers, but that I had a solid set of guardrails, I felt like. And if I was just going to sort of wander through life without the answer, I at least had some kind of a path between everything I learned from Buddhism and what I had picked up just through the years of study of like philosophy and ethics and things like that. So I didn't feel great about it, but I had met my first wife, and like we got married, and we started having kids right away, and I needed to go find a job to provide for my family. So a lot of that stuff kind of got put on hold out of necessity in some ways. And it was a few years of that, of me just kind of, I went back to school. That's where I went to Fair State to learn HVAC, and I had to find a job right after that. And so there was a lot of just living life and trying to just survive every day, and raise my kids and do all of that stuff. And I didn't have a ton of bandwidth at the time to keep like pursuing that stuff. And like I said, I was kind of okay with taking a break for a minute. And that probably lasted for, I don't know, it was close to probably 2 years, I'd say, give or take a little bit. And eventually, I don't really remember how or why, but I started to study Judaism, and I think what had happened is I think I read the Bible for the first time from like start to finish. And Moses has always been like a really important figure for me, sort of like at that time up until that point, like allegorically, and like what he kind of represents. And I was just really fascinated with the beginning of the Old Testament, like the 5 books of Moses, and then some definitely like the King David and everything that he went through, the Psalms. And it really hooked me in a way that surprised me, because I was only reading the Bible to kind of check the box, because up until that point I had read just about every sacred text out there except for the Bible. Like I had read all of the Gnostic literature that's available, all of the like Dead Sea Scroll stuff that's available, all of that, plus you name it, I read it. You know, whether it was Buddhism, Hinduism, shoot, man, everything. Like I read it all. The Quran, like, so the Bible was kind of the last big book that I had to check out. I never read the Book of Mormon, so you know, don't ask. But I did not. I refused to read that. That's mostly because of an interaction I had with a particular Mormon, and I didn't. It didn't impress me. Her whole thing was like, well, when you read it, you'll just know it's true. And I was like, that's not a thing. It does not work that way. You know, I might have been born yesterday, but I wasn't born last night. So, I transitioned out of Buddhism into really studying Judaism, and like I kind of always knew that wasn't going to be practical. But through that study, and like when I say study, I mean like I was learning Hebrew, which is really hard on the back of the throat because of all the, you know, like that's, but I had the Torah commentaries that I was reading. I was getting way into, like, there's like Rabbi Simon Jacobson and a couple other rabbis out there, and like I looked at those guys and I was like, these guys have like legit wisdom, and they have a peace about them that I recognized from some of the Tibetan monks that I was like following and learning from via the internet. But like the way that those guys would talk about really complex issues that people experience, and have it be so simple, not simple as in easy, but the way that like C.S. Lewis can write about really complex theological ideas and make it so that just about anybody can understand it. So I was like, man, these guys, like, they have something that I haven't seen yet. Like, I hadn't seen it in the New Age movement. I hadn't really seen it in Buddhism. I saw like glimpses of it. And I was like, these guys are onto something. And I got really into Modest Yahu's music, and Modest Yahu he is no longer, but he was a practicing Hasidic Jew, and so the Hasids are, they wear the hats and they've got the curls, and you know, they're very ultra-Orthodox Jews, which of course those would be the ones that I would be most interested in and attracted to, but I was listening to a lot of his music, and I was like, man, this is like, it was the first time that I started to be comfortable referring to the power that created all of this and governed my life and everything else. It's the first time that I started to be comfortable with referring to it as God. And I kind of just saw these really, you know, these really wise Jewish people who had like lived through this in a way that not many people can like appreciate. There's a history that it's a memory within that Jewish faith that I don't think anything else has, and the way that they remember things, and just it's in the fabric of their faith and in their daily lives in a way that was just extremely attractive to me. So I kind of got to the point where there are a few like options out there to sort of get really close to Judaism as somebody like me that is not, you know, I'm not Jewish, and I have no Jewish family members or anything like that, outside of like marrying into a Jewish family. Like, there are some options out there like to do that. And I looked at converting pretty seriously for a while, and I just could not. A big reason was because of my wife at the time, was raised Christian, grew up Christian, is a Christian, and I was like, well, I can't. Like, God would not do that to us, right? Like, he wouldn't like call me to become Jewish. Like, that makes no sense. There's just like that, it really was on my heart that like, well, that can't be an option. But I did take a ton of good stuff from that time. I really grew to love especially the Torah. I grew to love the Psalms. I grew to really like love the Jewish people and everything that they have gone through, and like even though their history is so, it's like a roller coaster with the Lord. Like there's still this faithful people that, they were God's chosen people from the beginning, man. And it, like I said, it was the first time that I was like, you know what, maybe this whole monotheism thing is not so crazy. And it was because I could see like what it was, how it worked for people that weren't Christians, but still had this living faith that was powerful. And I read a lot of different books from people like was it Wiesel, different accounts of how faith helped people get through just the atrocious things that happened to them during the Second World War and other times. It wasn't the only time that the Jews have been persecuted, and like you can't fake that kind of stuff. It has to come from somewhere. So that really started to, it was kind of an uncomfortable time for me because I just never thought I would get that close to a monotheistic religion and start to not only think it was, like it was a possibility that it could be true, but that it could bear the kind of fruit that I was seeing in people's lives. And just, like all the books that I read by like some of these rabbis, the wisdom in them, like I would read a couple lines and just be like, and sit there in awe at these guys' understanding and teaching and wisdom that they had. And again, I had not seen that anywhere else. It was worlds apart and above definitely from the New Age movement, and definitely way different than Buddhism for sure. I don't know that I'd say better, because that's not really the right way to put it, but definitely different. So that's kind of where I got into monotheism and this, kind of accepting that, like, all right, I can call whatever that is, I can call that God, and I can be okay with that. I can accept that. But it was really from within the context of Judaism and my understanding of it. And not that I was a practicing Jew, but that, like, if this is a life that a bunch of these people live, and the fruit that it's born in their lives, and they can call him the Lord God Almighty, creator of the universe, I probably can too. And also, what else did I have left? Nothing. By the time I got to Judaism, my list was awfully short. There were not many places left to go. I had turned over just about every stone. So the next time I will get into how I got into, this will be the start of like how I got into Christianity. And it's going to take a while, because it was a long time for me to get from, accepting just like the reality of, like, is Jesus who he says he is? And then I spent time in the evangelical communities, and then eventually I came back to the church. But the next episode, that's what I'll talk about, is how I researched my way into accepting that Jesus was who he says he was. Most likely, like statistically speaking, to me it seemed like it was about a 98%, that he is who he says he is. And the same thing with the scripture, because even though I had read the Bible and I had been studying the Torah and reading the Psalms regularly, to put it within the context of Christianity, that was a way different ballgame for me, because there's first of all, there's a whole nother book to go with it. There's the New Testament, but is the Bible accurate? Like, can you trust it to be what it says it is, or what people think that it is? So I will get into all that. I appreciate you guys watching and everybody's patience with me for not getting this up on Sunday like I said I would, but there's going to be a book that'll come out because of it. So hopefully that's fruitful also. Thanks for watching, guys.